Welcome to Summit University. Today our guest is Steven Acuff. He's a best-selling author and lecturer on health and diet in Europe and the United States. Mr. Acuff specializes in the macrobiotic diet. He is an instructor at the Cushy Institutes in Massachusetts and a nutritional counselor at a medical clinic in Germany. He is also director of a macrobiotic center in Sweden. Mr. Acuff is here today to talk about Oriental Diagnosis.
Well, welcome to the next session of our seminar here on Oriental Diagnosis, evaluating our health with the techniques which are very old, coming originally from China. We're going now to go into the most basic part of the human body, which is our constitution. Now, our constitution has basically two influences. Number one is the genetic charge from our parents. There are genetic characteristics which are passed on. Some people, or actually many people, have an exaggerated view of the role of genetics, because genetic information, as it's passed on, is actually more open to influences from our environment than we think. We have only to think about what happens when radiation comes into the picture to see how quickly genetic material can be changed. But not only radiation can change it, also other things. Chemical toxins. And the Chinese of old gave us the picture of the basic constitution as being a mixture of the genetic information and the food which was eaten by the mother during pregnancy. These two make up the basis for our constitution. To a lesser degree, the food which the child eats from birth to puberty also affects the constitution. But when we think about the amount of development that goes on from one fertilized egg to a baby, we can appreciate the impact which the food has on the baby's constitution, and it is the basis for life. A mother who chooses to drink alcohol or to smoke during pregnancy is giving her child a handicap for life. It's a very big responsibility to carry a child, and we see, unfortunately today, all too many women who are more absorbed in their own enjoyment and their own habits than they are in really creating healthy life for the future. Of course, I don't even have to speak about the chaotic effect of drugs being taken during pregnancy. Many of us still have in memory from the 60s the thalidomide scandal, mothers taking a tranquilizer, a totally unnecessary thing just to make the mother a little calmer during pregnancy, and this prevented the development of arms on the children. I have met several people who are the unfortunate victims of this scandal. But it is a good reminder to us that what the mother does during pregnancy is very important. And taking a lot of chemical additives, etc., will give a weaker constitution. Now, having heard this, we could easily imagine who has stronger basic constitutions? Elder people or younger people? Of course, elder people. When we think of people who were born 70 years ago, how much chocolate, how much cola, how much ice cream did these people eat? And more important, how much did their mothers eat during pregnancy? How many women smoked during pregnancy 70 years ago? We see that in the 20th century, there's been an acceleration of destructive habits which are bad enough on the human being for what he does to himself. The real tragedy is that children are born and they are born less than what they could have been. And many birth defects are preventable if the parents, especially the mother, only understood the connection between the food she eats every day and the constitution of the child. Now, this doesn't mean that she should be very tense and worried about it, that she might do something wrong that would hurt the child. It's just a matter of, in a relaxed way, being conscious of not making the wrong choices for consumption. And in Sweden, where I live, women are monitored through pregnancy on the amount of alcohol and tobacco they consume. But I would be very happy if someday we'd also monitor the amount of chocolate they're eating during pregnancy, the amount of cola they're drinking, the amount of chemical additives they're taking in through ice cream, because these are also important factors. So, when we understand this, we know what a great responsibility it is to carry a child, and we can then give the child the maximum possibility. For those attending the seminar today, we have all age groups represented, which is great because we can take a look at some of the elder people and some of the younger people and see what is different. Now, we have the basic concepts of yin and yang out of the Chinese understanding of energy, which we also use for constitution. The yin energy is the expansive energy. In other words, an energy tendency expanding, in the process of expanding, is what we would call yin. And the energy tendency of contraction, getting tighter, we call yang. So we can talk about yin and yang constitutions. So when I tell you this about expansion and contraction, you can easily imagine someone who is very tall. Someone who is very tall is going to be, in general, more yin, because yin is the expansive force. Now, how tall are the young people of today, let's say the generation in the teens and 20s, how tall are they compared to their grandparents? Much taller. Some of them even a head taller. So we can very easily conclude that the constitution of today is more yin than before. It was interesting, once I went to the Nordic Museum in Stockholm, and I was looking at the armor which was worn in earlier years, in earlier times, earlier centuries, as a protection in battle. And this armor looked like it was made for a dwarf. People for a couple centuries ago. You walk into houses. Recently, I read in the news that in Holland, they have now raised the building restrictions, or raised the height that doors must be in the building restrictions, because young people are bumping their heads. See, people are changing much faster than we realize. These things don't just go through us without leaving a trace. So in general, more yin. Now, other things which show a yin constitution are if the facial features tend to be more spread out as opposed to contracted. We can almost think of it as, think of like an energy vibration we could imagine on the face, and this energy vibration is either pulling the eyes, nose, and mouth towards each other, or it seems to be spreading them out. And with these two, you can well imagine yin and yang. The more yin face is eyes wider apart, more distance between eyes and mouth. The more yang constitution will be tighter in the eyes, less distance between mouth and eyes. Now, the interesting thing about all this is that we don't just have two groups of people, the yinians and the youngsters, because everybody is a mixture of all these. Now, let's remember, if we think about the kind of foods which I talked about in the last session as being extremely yin or yang, sugar, chemical additives, coffee, alcohol, milk, tropical fruits, all these things that can be seen as extremely yin, these are never eaten just as the one emphasis, and the other things are always lacking. The yang things, which are cheese, meat, eggs, excessive salt. So what we have is that everybody is always taking both. If people eat cheese, which is very yang, they'll tend to like orange juice, which is very yin. So they tend to like to take both things in their extreme form. And this is the way everybody is subconsciously trying to make balance, whether they know it or not. So everybody is a mixture. And we can maybe keep this picture very clear if we think now about the time when the face is developing. You've probably seen pictures of the developing embryo, and that the eyes are very far apart in the beginning. Look almost like a frog or something. The eyes are very far out. And then as the development of the face goes on, the eyes get more and more tight together. It's what we would call a yang process of contraction. The face is contracting to become the human form. So when we do basic diagnosis of constitution, we see some people will have eyes that are much further apart, and we can see this as a yin influence during this time when the eyes are pulling together, which is a natural process in the fetus, that then at this moment the yin energy, which the mother is taking through the consumption of strong yin foods, especially sugar, but also alcohol, etc., that this energy will be slowed down, this contraction, so that the eyes don't really get pulled as far together as they would have otherwise. If it was just a matter of genetics, we would probably see much more similarity among siblings. But the fact is, we often see big differences. Now, one thing we have noticed is that people who are born more in the fall have much more clearly, say, yin constitutions than those that are born in the spring. And we can imagine easily why that is. The mother is experiencing her pregnancy, for the most part, during the warmest months of the year. Her tendency to take fruit juice, sugary fruit drinks, or sugary drinks, these different things that people like to quench their thirst. In general, the consumption of ice cream, etc., will be much more in the summer, giving the pregnancy much more of a yin domination. Whereas the mother who's carrying the child through the winter months will be less likely to be consuming a lot of ice cream. That is, let's say if she's living in a temperate climate. So we can see these two differences. So it can be interesting for you also, as you go out and practice this, to find out when people are born. With summer and winter, it's not quite so clear because there's some of both, but the fall and spring are two where you can see some clear differences. So you'll see among brother and sister that one born in the spring, one born in the fall, be very different energies. So then also the mouth. There can be a wider mouth or a more narrow mouth. Now, with your understanding of yin and yang, you can easily understand which mouth is more yin and which is more yang. The wide mouth is more yin. Narrow mouth, more yang. Let's think about maybe some good examples. Think of some of the first photos that were taken, say around the turn of the century. If you look at those people, you'll see that they have different constitutions than people today. Like look, at the town fire department, the volunteer fire department or something like that. It's even interesting to look at pictures of soldiers marching off to World War I. You can also see very strong constitutions in these people. Very strong in the sense that they have, number one, very much symmetry in their face. If there's a big difference between left and right, this is a sign of a weaker constitution. The mouths in general are tighter. A tighter mouth is a sign of strength. Wider mouth, more a sign of weakness. And maybe this is a good time for me to point out something. None of us should be sad about our wide mouths or that our eyes are far apart or anything else I'm going to talk about here, because we want to remember that the most important thing for us with this whole subject is that we want to learn how to make better balance in our lives. And if we understand that we have a weak constitution, which is becoming more and more prevalent the more degenerated the food is of our young people, then we understand that we have to work harder. We have to roll up our sleeves and work harder to make balance. Whereas elder people are really being given things just as a gift. That is, their basic constitution. I am certain that when the young people of today who are spending their time at the fast food restaurants, who are spending their time listening to loud music in discotheques, that when these people have reached the age of 60 and beyond, that they're going to fare much worse than the elder people today. We already have enough degenerative disease among these older people, but young people are going to experience it will be a health crisis which we can't even imagine. And this can sound like a lot of like panic and exaggerated statements, but with our ability to see constitution in people, we can understand that my statement is not so far-fetched. That young people definitely have all the signs of weak constitutions because they've only been around since the 70s, maybe, or the late 60s, and at that time, all of this modern fast food and convenience foods and snacking and all this non-food had become just the order of the day and no longer the occasional treat which it was before. So I hope that all of you, as of today, will start looking at people, young, old, checking out their constitution. And if I give you some advice or give you some information here which sounds like you have a weak constitution, then don't worry about it. Think about how lucky you are to find out about this so that you can do something about it. Because you don't have to just live in a weakened state, but rather what it means is a weakened constitution, that would be the wider mouth, eyes wider apart, or not symmetry in the face, or small ears. Smaller ears are a weaker constitution, bigger ears are a stronger constitution. So those with big ears now can at last appreciate what they've got after all those thoughts of having them operated or whatever. But especially with big ears, it's this portion. This is a reflection of the mineral balance during the pregnancy. If you've got earlobes which are longer, you will be more likely to have a strong constitution than if you don't have earlobes. So if we look at elder people as opposed to younger people, very clear, we see that there are more clear earlobes in older people. Have you ever seen the statue of the Buddha and see the earlobes on Buddha? In the Far East, the earlobes have always been connected with physical vitality. I just visited my grandmother who celebrated her 100th birthday, and I was especially interested in checking out her earlobes. And they're this big on both sides. She grew up very simple, pioneer spirit, homesteading, very simple life, ate oats for breakfast every morning. And she has a simple lifestyle connected with strong constitution. These are the things that give us the possibilities of living a long, healthy life. So, other signs of a strong as opposed to weak constitution would be having thin eyebrows as opposed to thicker eyebrows. Now, for women, we have to take into account that we may not be seeing the real eyebrows. So we usually, when we use this part of diagnosis, we usually stay more with the men. And another point for constitutional diagnosis is the hand. Now, a broad hand with shorter fingers is a sign of more yang, and a longer hand with thinner fingers is a sign of more yin. So, a very good barometer of our constitution is to look at the hand and see, does it have a broadness to it, or is it longer? And here it's better to compare men among themselves and to compare women among themselves, because men have a different hand form than women in general. So you can easily imagine what is more yin and what is more yang if you think of the hand of an unborn fetus of, first of all, being a little knob and then gradually the fingers growing out of this hand. But if the yin force predominates, this expansion will tend to be more. If the yang force predominates, then you will have the tighter fingers coming out. Just the same as with the height. The person doesn't grow so much as composed to yin. The yin force is less. It's interesting that there is so much cesarean section birth today, becoming more and more. And I suspect that part of the problem is that there is, it's only part, but definitely a part of it, is that babies also have become bigger. And it's important to be able to get that baby out. So the recommendations to take a lot of dairy food will tend to make the child more yin, and it will grow more and it will make it a little more difficult to get out. So our recommendation would be, in pregnancy, don't take a lot of dairy food, and optimally, practically none at all. So other signs of a strong constitution are in the jaw area. We'll see more an angular form as opposed to a more slanting form, softer form. This can be for the whole head too. So the head can have a more square form, or it can be more like an oval. So it looks like this. Say this would be a good example of our person with a yang constitution, maybe also long ears, and a little bit exaggerated, of course, so that we can appreciate the differences. This would be more the yin form of face. So you can really imagine here this tightness. So here we would imagine also on the hand that the fingers, a little smaller here, be somewhat bigger. So you can imagine the more sloping of the jaw as being more a sign of yin, whereas this kind of face is more yang. Now we make a distinction here because we're going to, in the course of this seminar, going to take up the next subject, which is condition. We're not doing that now, but condition is the actual situation right now. So some people may look like this because they've taken a lot of fat. and they're eating a lot of highly refined carbohydrates, which form into fatty acids. So actually, they may be fairly puffy, but if we look at the form of their face, it's not really an angular jaw we're looking at, but more just that which has been put on it. So we want to keep these two ideas separate. We're talking about constitution or condition. So right now, our subject is constitution, so we'll go into condition later, just so you don't make that mistake of thinking any kind of a full face would be more yang, but rather it's the bone structure. Because these things just don't change. It doesn't matter what we do in life, we cannot affect the distance between our eyes. We can't affect our jaw form. It's the condition we can change. But to understand our condition better, it's good to see where we're coming from. So that's why we start with constitution. And constitution is an easy thing for you to understand. I would also recommend that maybe after this session, that as you're walking along, looking at people, of course, places like airports or any place, a big city where there's lots of people, is a lot of fun to do this. You'll never be bored again, as long as you've got people around. Looking at the people and then just kind of dividing them up, yin constitution, yang constitution, or kind of hard to say, something in the middle, because many people have characteristics of both. And this is showing they're kind of in the middle. If we're going to take me, for example, we would say that my eyes are very deep set, which is terrible for cameras, but it does show that I have a yang force in my constitution, because the fact that eyes are more withdrawn further in is a sign of yang. It's more contracted, whereas eyes that are more protruding would be more yin. So then we have the shoulder area. Now, if the shoulders have more an angular look, a little bit exaggerated again, just so we get the idea. If they have this more angular look, this is a more what we would call yang, just like with the jaw. Whereas with yin, we'll have more sloping shoulders. So we can do bodybuilding and anything else, and we can build up the muscles, but the original structure of the shoulders doesn't change. So looking at my shoulders, we would say this is more a sign of a yang constitution. My shoulders are more like this. And in a few moments, we can ask a few people to come up, and we'll start taking this theory into practice and see how different people fare here as examples of yin or yang or mixed. So this is our basis. And we can, by looking at that very quickly, get an idea, is this more yin or yang constitution? We'll find that certain groups of people tend to have more yin or yang constitutions. For example, Southern Europeans are more compact. Northern Europeans tend to be more yin. Greeks, for example, Greeks are shorter. Once I was riding a bus in southern Italy, and I noticed it was so crowded on the bus that most people were standing, and everybody was a head shorter than me. It was like just standing and looking at all these black-haired heads, and it was quite obvious that I was from a different place. just shorter. So these are genetic things. So it's partly genetic, and it's partly what was done during pregnancy. So we'll see people that have also in their teeth, they'll have very even teeth. Very even teeth is more a sign of being compact. Of course, it can be too compact. Some people's teeth will tend to grow in. This is like a sign of excess yang, like excess salt or too much animal quality food. Some people's teeth will more stick out, or there will be gaps between the teeth, or some people we see a real strong gap between the two front teeth. Now, where there are gaps like that, you can well imagine that here we're talking about yin excess. And especially teeth that are not straight sign of yin. So we look at the person, we'll see there are good earlobes, harmonious face, more square facial structure, the eyes a little closer together. We look at the hand and see shorter fingers, look at the shoulders. We get an idea most things speak for yang. But we might find that 4 things speak for yang and 1 thing speaks for yin. That would mean we would say this person tends more to a yang constitution. Another person might be the opposite. For example, he may have the slanting form in the face here, but the eyes may be very close together, showing that there are both energies going there. It's been very interesting for me through the years doing nutritional counseling with people with health problems of how many people with diabetes, which we consider a yin disease, we'll go into that later, but how many people with diabetes actually have a yang constitution. And what often happens is people with a yang constitution are able to handle excesses of yin extreme foods without noticing that it's destroying their bodies, because they have that kind of resistance. People with a yang constitution basically have more, let's say, ability to buffer the effects of strong yin foods than those with a yin constitution. So if a person is like this, maybe very puffy, as diabetics sometimes are, so the condition would be different, but we can see through that diabetic condition and see that there is a basic yang constitution. Because here I'm speaking of diabetes number 2, the one that you get through the years, not the one which is called juvenile diabetes. But what happens is those who have a yin constitution will tend to notice that they don't feel good when they let themselves go with extreme things, and they may tend to be more health conscious. They may try to take care of themselves better. Whereas the person with the yang constitution will have this feeling, I can handle anything. Why should I pay attention to health? I don't go to doctors, I feel good all the time. How many remember the story of Pete Maravich, famous basketball player? How he just, I think it was the age of 39, while a basketball game was going on, had a heart attack and just died on the spot. This is very typical for what happens today. About 50% of all heart attacks happen without any pre-warning at all. These are often people who may say have yang constitutions, who think that there's nothing to worry about, they're doing just fine. They don't understand that heart attacks don't necessarily come with warnings. All you need is one rupture of one plaque in the wrong place in your body, and life can be snuffed out in a matter of minutes. And so people who have a yang constitution have, on one hand, an advantage. They're a little bit more resilient in dealing with the burdens of life, we can say, especially with all of the yin things people like. Because usually it's the ice cream and chocolate and sugar and coffee. These are the things, alcohol, that people really like to indulge in. And if you have a yang constitution, your body will absorb that burden better. But it has a backside to it. The backside is that you can lull yourself into believing that your body can handle anything. And sometimes the message comes very quick, without any warning, and can turn life upside down in a matter of minutes. The person with the more yin constitution has, in general, less ability to deal with sugar, to deal with coffee, to deal with alcohol. But on the other hand, these people will be more aware that their bodies have limits, have biological limits, and that they cannot just do as they please. That if they go too far beyond their limits, they feel it. So, just one example, a woman I just recently counseled with, let's say, a yin constitution, and she loves to drink coffee. But as the years have gone on, she has become more and more yin, and now just 1 cup of coffee and she loses bladder control, which is a very embarrassing situation to anyone. And it's so embarrassing that she stopped drinking coffee. Imagine there's actually something that can make people stop drinking coffee. And there it is. that will make the most, hard-necked coffee drinker stop. But it's just pushing it too far. Coffee is extremely yin. And if you think of bladder control is something we call yang, because the bladder holds together. If the bladder can't hold the urine and you lose it without control, this is just too yin. And for her, all she knows was that 1 cup of coffee and then it happened. So when you start understanding these connections, your life quality becomes totally different. And above all, you make the choice yourself. Some people choose the coffee anyway, but the smart person will choose health and balance. So that's in general what we can say about constitution. I think now we can go over to some practical examples, and I'll ask some of you to come up to the stage if you would like to show yourselves. We're always very grateful to anyone who comes up, because this means that you're open to showing yourself to others, that you are willing to share that so that other people can learn, and that's great. So if we point out certain weaknesses, then number one, everyone has strengths and weaknesses. There's no one who is just strong. It would be a very boring person who had only strengths. That's what life on earth is all about. We're here on earth to try to deal with our weaknesses and to improve ourselves. And so we learn what is not in balance with us, and then we can try to make more balance. But we're spending our whole lives really pushing ourselves into more and more balance, but there's no state of perfect balance, not on this earth. And so as we look at people, let's keep that in mind, that if we point out certain things that may sound negative, that we're painting a very bad picture of the person, that it's just that we're trying to see how these things are working, and hopefully the person who is being described will be able to use this information for more balance. Okay, so we'll start with basic constitution. I think I'll start with, say, a couple of women. It's always best to compare women and men, because women have a different body structure than men. How is the shoulder area in women compared to men? It's less broad. So if we're going to check these shoulders, are they this way or this way? Let's look just at men. How is it with the hips in women compared to men? That's right, women are broader. So women have a form which we could call, also, are they taller or shorter than men? Shorter. All these things are like the lower center of gravity, that women have more in general, a yang constitution. Their center of gravity is lower. With men, the center of gravity is a little higher, but especially being shorter, they live longer. Endurance is also a sign of a yang constitution, living longer. And men are generally taller. This is just in general now. So that we will have our best learning experience if we stay with the same sex for the comparison. Okay, so we'll take a look now, and I'm going to walk out to the edge of the stage and see who would be good for study. Would you come up? Maybe you? No, here? Yeah, in the pink? Yeah. Okay, that's good. You stand there like that. That's good. And then you stand right here next. Okay, great. So now, with modern styles, we get thrown off a little bit. Huh? So we'll just keep that in mind. But in general, when we look at these two examples of constitution, we can see this is very typical for yin constitution. All the things I've been talking about yin, we can see them here. First of all, maybe if we'll turn here slowly to the side, you see this more sloping jaw rather than the square jaw. We'll see, mouth is wider. How old are you?
24.
24. So her generation is also more the yin generation. It's the Pepsi generation. Okay, maybe you take off your glasses. We'll take a look at your eyes. So, eyes are somewhat bigger now. If we think of this visualization I mentioned earlier about imagining an energy force in front of her face, how would that be? Would it be more an expanding force or a contracting? Yeah, you can see the expanding force very easily here. Let's take a look at your hands. Okay. So this is, well, we'll just take a look at that for now. We need a comparison here to see what the other is. Okay, you can put that down. So now, turn to the side again maybe. So we want to say something good here too, and that is that she has definitely an earlobe. You can see that. And so she's still got some original strength, but we can say that the overall energy here is more yin. So what this especially means for her practically is her whole life she has to be very careful with taking strong yin foods, because if she chooses to go the way of the average industrialized society person, which means 40, 50 kilos of sugar a year, that's about 100, 120 pounds of sugar per year per person, that is average consumption. About half of this is concealed sugar in different dressings and sauces and breads, and about half of it is the sugar in your tea and the sugar in your coffee and the sugar in the cakes or in the icing. But a lot of this is very concealed sugar. So she must be very careful with anything that is sweet of the extreme nature. Of course, sweet is okay if it's proper, like more local kind of fruits rather than tropical fruits. Because of the two, she will be much more likely to have an imbalance of that, because she already has a basic energy which is yin. So she doesn't want too much of that other. On the other hand, yin energy is more an expansive energy, and that's the kind of energy that gives us also connection more to, let's say, artistic, more abstract ideas, intellectual ideas, and also spiritual energy. It's good to have yin energy, because this is also something that will give us a tendency to look at the spiritual side of life. So there's a very good side to having more yin constitution, as long as it doesn't go too far yin. But, and that's our point here, for her it's important on the one hand to always be aware of taking strong yin foods, keep those to a minimum. But number two, because she is a more yin person, it is not the purpose of this that she should now just eat yang foods to become yang, because she's actually a yin. She's an yin energy, and she should support that energy because it's a good energy. But what she should do is be careful that it doesn't get too yin, and above all, take good quality yin, because that's her basic nature. She will nurture her basic substance by taking good quality yin. Now, what does good quality yin mean? Number one, plenty of vegetables. There is a tendency when people eat the macrobiotic food that they go very strong with eating a lot of grains and a little too little of the vegetables, because grains, that means rice and oats and buckwheat and rye and millet, barley, all these greens that we like to eat, these are much easier to cook and don't take so much time. what really takes the time is cleaning the vegetables, cutting the vegetables. That's where people get bogged down. So there'll be a tendency sometimes to eat more grain and do just some quick vegetable dishes. For her, it's important that she gets plenty of good vegetable quality, because otherwise she won't really be having that inner balance which goes towards the yin side. So then our other example here, maybe we'll switch places now. So now when we look at the general energy, first of all, condition is of course more yin because it's more expanded, but that's a condition, and we'll talk about that later. Right now we want to see beyond the yin condition and look at the basic constitution. We can see that, maybe you take off your glasses too, we get a good look at you. So when we see her face, especially if we hold the hair up like this, we can see that there's more contraction, the energy towards the facial features, that her mouth is tighter. How old are you, if I may ask?
43.
43. So this is almost just about a generation elder. It's baby boomers. Huh? We're both baby boomers. So more yang in the facial features. Now she's got some very nice earrings there, but I can just tell you that there are also nice earlobes behind those earrings. So now well, let's both of you hold up your hands and we'll put them, maybe what we'll do is, hold them like that. Now, I don't know how well this carries out to the last people back there in the last rows, but can you see the yang energy in her hand as opposed to her hand? Can you see it? Very good, because this is what we're talking about. About a force which here is much more yang, here more yin, and if you're ever in doubt, is it more yin or yang? Because many people are a good mixture of both. That's why I studied the faces as I went along, because I wanted to find clear examples and not too much mixture. So what we can see is that this hand is showing this contractive force more yang. Okay, you can put your hands down now. This one is more expansive, more yin. And, okay, we can put that down now. For her, the most important thing is being very careful with yang extreme foods. This means animal food. Animal food is a compact form of the vegetable kingdom. You have the cow be grazing here and grazing there, and all of this grass is being transformed into meat, or it's being transformed into milk, or the chicken is pecking the grains and the vegetable leftovers, and the eggs are forming. So these are all very yang foods. So if she chooses to eat those, because she has a yang basic constitution, she'll very easily get out of balance. Now, if she chooses to take these detrimental foods like chocolate and ice cream, they're not good for her, but she has a little more resilience there to deal with it. But again, the problem can be because you don't feel the immediate discord that happens with this, you may be lulled into thinking that you can eat these things and nothing happens. Now, many people are many people with yang constitutions will tend to get overweight because the excess that we see here is yin. It's an excess of fat, excess of liquid, and the yang that she has in her basic constitution holds that tighter. So we see people who have a yang constitution have more trouble losing weight than people who have a yin constitution, because fat and water are both yin, and we have one basic rule in macrobiotic thinking, and that is that yin and yang attract, yang and yang repel, yin and yin repel. So we can easily understand that we think of the attraction between masculine and feminine energy. It's like an attraction, it's very strong, pulls together. And those two make up the whole. There's the masculine side, the feminine side. or we can say the yin side and the yang side. So, having strong yang in the basic constitution, she attracts a lot of basic yin so that she holds it and doesn't let go of it so easy. So this will be more yang constitution people who are reading the latest women's magazine about the new grapefruit diet, or, you know, how I lost 10 pounds in 12 hours. You know, it's always some kind of fantastic promise that's made, because a lot of people are out there trying to lose weight. An interesting study was done in the beginning of the 80s. They looked at the Weight Watchers and all the people that are trying to lose weight. Everyone who had been involved in a weight-reducing diet program in the 70s. They want to find out people who had weight-reducing diet programs in the 70s, how they were doing in the 80s. And they found that 2% of these people were now satisfied with their weight, and 98% were still trying to figure it out. So dieting doesn't work, and it never will work, because the only way to really come into balance is to make your daily food your diet. So people with yang constitution will have more difficulty with this because they're holding that, whereas yin constitutions, they can let that go. So these people will usually envy those people, because they'll say, look at them, they can eat all this food and let themselves go. They eat butter and everything. If I do it, I can't walk through the door, you know, and the other person does it and stays slim and looks nice. And it's this basic energy. Some people hold it and some don't. So with a high fiber diet, she with a yang constitution will also come down to a weight which is optimal for her health, because fiber is not absorbable. That means it counts 0 for calories. When people watch me eat, they see that I don't eat a small portion. I actually enjoy a big portion of food, and they say, how can someone eat so much food and be so thin? But it's very easy. High fiber food, you eat it, but you don't absorb it. What it does is it acts as a cleansing through your entire digestive tract, and it prevents things like constipation and toxic buildup in the intestines. So you can eat as much as you want. That's not the point. The point is the quality of the food. Is it high fiber food, which is not absorbable, or is it highly refined food, which is very absorbable? Now, one other thing we want to take up here before we conclude this comparison is that there's one other thing that's yang, which I haven't brought up yet, and that is baked flour. Now, if we have the whole grain and we eat it, this is something that's very optimal for cleansing purposes. If we choose to take baked flour, like cookies, and lots of bread, and lots of cakes, baked flour, it means that the calorie absorption goes up dramatically. It also means that the person will become more yang. Baked flour is a yang kind of thing. It's a yang energy. So it gathers deep and it increases the yang. And I have found that the biggest hindrance for women, especially women because they tend to have more yang constitutions than men, their biggest hindrance to losing weight if they're doing a full macrobiotic program is they're still eating too much baked flour. Now, if someone comes to me and is very thin and says, I'm too thin, how can I gain weight? I would recommend a good whole grain bread. Bread is good food because you can gain weight with bread. But if she comes to me and says, I've been doing the different diets and nothing's working, and now I'm doing this macrobiotic diet and it's still not working, my recommendation to her would be, for about 3 months, no baked flour. That would mean no bread, no cookies, no cakes, no pies, baked flour. In other words, something most people don't want to do. But for those who do it, it has tremendous results. That body cleansing ability clicks in. So those would be our 2 examples, and we could say here, for her long-term perspective, she needs good quality yang, like eating bread, fish is also a more yang food. That will nurture her basic energy. She shouldn't make a point of now, because she has a yang constitution, to only eat yin foods, because that's not it. But rather, if she can release some of that deep yang she has with a program over a certain number of weeks or a few months. She can release that and come more into balance, come down to a weight which is optimal, and then in the long run still eating bread and these things which are heartier foods, because people with yang constitution need hearty foods. She can still enjoy those, but just for the first time, try to go more with, say, a yin releasing program. To get discharge and release of buildup, we need yin. That means lots of vegetables, being very careful with the salt and salty condiments, and staying away from baked. Okay, thank you very much. Now maybe we'll take a look at some men as a comparison. Let's see, let's take you two gentlemen, would you like to come up? You two right there, yeah. And we have yin and yang sitting right next to each other there. Come around here. So right there. So now when we look at the basic constitutions again, now that we've already been through it once, you can look, I think you'll see immediately why I chose these two. See very clearly some signs of yin and yang constitution. Here, of course, maybe we'll take a side shot of the face now. See more slanting, and here you turn yours to the side. Here, more the square jaw. So this, more yang, more yin. Okay? Then, then if we come back to this original idea of seeing these forces just hovering at the surface of the face, you can easily imagine that here you would have this expansive force creating the facial features. Here, more the yang force. So everybody see that? Okay. If we look at the mouth, looks a little bit bigger. There's not a lot of difference, but here a little bit bigger, a little more yin. Now let's take a look at the hands. So, with the hand, can you see the length of the fingers here compared to the hand is what? Less or more compared to here? Yeah, this one, the fingers are less. The hand is this much. Fingers are here. Over here, we've got more about the same. So we would say that, in general, this is not a sign of a real yin hand, though. It would be much thinner. His hands show basically also some yang energy. But comparing the two, we could say that what speaks for yang here is that the fingers are shorter. What speaks yang for here is that the hand is very broad. Thank you. So now let's take a look at the shoulders. Now we all stand here and also be an example here so you can look at three shoulders. So you can see here a little bit more sloping. Right? So the sloping, a little more sign of yin. And more the angle, more yang. Now, men in general are more yin in their constitution, and overweight problems tend to be less. We also have, of course, overweight problems with men, but in general, it's the women who are always battling with this problem of overweight. Men, especially if they go over to our kind of food, in other words, grains, vegetables as your basic food, cutting out the saturated fat and cholesterol, cutting out the refined carbohydrates like sugar, white flour. By cutting those things out, your body automatically comes into balance. And I don't know if I've ever seen one case of a man who didn't lose weight down to a good size for him, which can look like underweight to the average eye, but as I explained in the last session, is only because we're used to seeing people who are slightly overweight, that when someone with normal weight shows up, we see that as underweight. But if we would walk on the streets of Bangkok, we would get a totally different view of that, because Thais have a body form, weight, which is much different. So in general, we see overweight problems more in women because of the more yang nature of their inner constitution. And when men do macrobiotics, that means eating these kind of food, cutting out the other things, doing also physical exercise is a good way to become more yang, especially for males, that you can improve that energy and bring it more into balance. Whereas a woman, she may switch over to our recommendations and may still be dissatisfied with the results. There you can see it, but really, no man will ever have weight problems unless he thinks it might be underweight, in which case he should eat more bread, just as an example. The man will, as a macrobiotic person, will have more tendency to underweight than women will. So they may have to think about the kind of rich, nourishing foods they need to keep balance. Women will be more involved with trying to lose weight in general. Okay, thank you very much. So with these examples you've seen, now many of the people sitting here today are examples of both. And what we'll do in the coming sessions is, when other people are coming up as examples of different conditional factors, I will be making references to their constitution, because this is always the basis of where people are starting from. So now that you know the basis of constitution, you will hear me saying yin, yang constitution, or maybe a mixture of both. And then we'll go one step further and start looking at condition. The condition of the person is what he does with his life, what he makes out of what he's been given. When we understand these two, then we know that we can do a lot about so-called hereditary illnesses. I hear some people say sometimes, I'm worried about my heart because in my family there's a lot of heart disease. Well, atherosclerosis, which is the most widespread disease in modern society, the hardening of the arteries. Basically everyone has it if they're not consciously avoiding it. That atherosclerosis is something which cannot happen if your cholesterol level is 150 or less. And if you eat the kind of food that we eat, you will most likely be at the 150 or less margin. It runs anywhere from 130 to 160 is very common for people eating the way we do. So if someone tells you, well, you have to watch out, in your family there's a lot of heart disease, and you're prone to that, well, you can just laugh at that idea if you understand the connections and know that genetic tendencies are not what decide health. Your constitution is only one side of this. But if you understand that you are genetically related to people who tend to have heart problems, then you know that you'd better not fool around with high cholesterol foods. Keep your cholesterol level to 150 or less, and you don't have to measure it. I've never had my cholesterol measured, but I know about what it is because I'm reading everybody else's all the time. And people who eat the way we do very seldom go over 160. Maybe sometimes 170, but those are the exceptions. Generally, it goes from 130 to 160, and these people do not have to worry about atherosclerosis. It's just that simple. And there is medical evidence backing up what I just said. So we can see what a wonderful tool this is, knowing how we can use food to promote our health. We don't have to be fearful to think that we got bad cards when the deck was dealt when we were born, that we have to, our whole life deal with these weaknesses. But rather, we take time to understand what promotes health, what doesn't, and step by step, we move more and more into health balance. So I hope that now, during our break, before we start the next session, that you all will take time to look at each other, check out check out the yin and yang. It's a wonderful way to make new friends, get to know people better. And then we'll consider the condition of our participants then during the next session. Thank you very much.